made that decision to escape, to leave, it's one of the most dangerous times when fatality is at its highest level. Our job is to make sure that the people who need us don't die.
Jennifer Hernandez, founder of ECLI-VIBES, a nonprofit organization founded here in Long Island that helps support victims of human trafficking, child abuse, sexual abuse, and the like. What you're dealing with, those are real issues. Someone is facing life or death. Someone is being physically abused, sexually abused, emotionally abused on a regular basis.
We're sort of peeling away all the layers of the trauma that they've experienced. They have watched people kill themselves. They have watched people be murdered in front of them. They have been sexually abused. People were going to counseling, but there was no food on the table. They weren't sure how they were going to pay rent that month. How are you going to sit with a person and talk about all these different things when immediate needs to survive are not being met?
Welcome to another episode of the Real Mentors Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Martin. As always, REAL stands for Real Examples Altering Lives. Today in studio, it is an honor to have Jennifer Hernandez. She is the founder of ECLI-VIBES, a nonprofit organization founded here in Long Island that helps support victims of human trafficking, child abuse, sexual abuse, and the like. Welcome to the show today, Jennifer. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm happy to have you on the show. What you do is so impactful. We finally got to meet the other day. I've got to tell the story because I just have this saying, right? When you step into your purpose, God rolls out the red carpet and puts the right people in your path. Your husband is a longtime friend of mine who I had not seen in over a decade. Mm-hmm. I was taking one of my mentees to the Islanders Rangers game, and I ran into your husband, and I just scream out, "Gabe!" And he looks over, and he's got your two kids, and we were like, "Holy cow!" We bro hugged, and he told me that you were there, and your organization was being honored and represented, and you had a table. I didn't get to meet you that night at UBS. But lo and behold, the morning of a couple weeks ago, I'm reaching out because I hadn't reached out to him until the night of that event. And I tell him, "Hey, Gabe, I wanted to circle back and see about getting your wife and talking about her organization on the show." And that night, I'm at a gala here in Long Island for nonprofits called the Imagine Awards. And I texted him, and he had texted me back your email address because I wanted to send an email on some of the downtime during the show. And he goes, "She's at an event tonight." And I just knew right then that was the event because it just made sense. An event for nonprofits. And that's just how God has been in my life recently because I'm in my purpose, helping others and giving them a platform.
Oh, you can't make that story up.
No, you can't.
I mean, I was telling my director of development who was with us that night, I was telling her a little bit about how Gabriel ran into you and how you guys are like long time, you haven't seen each other in forever, but you used to hang out. She's like, "You've got to be kidding me." And then you were walking over the moment that I was texting with him. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? He's here?" And he was telling me what table you were at and all that stuff. And I started, I was like telling Heather. And then you literally walked over in that second. And just really incredible.
In my bright red jacket. You couldn't miss me.
Yeah, you were looking good with the jacket. That's right.
I get dressed up when I have to, but otherwise, this is the uniform.
Yeah.
This is the uniform.
As we're getting older, I have to wear these orthopedic shoes now because of all the events and all the high heels and things. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So hopefully
with age comes wisdom, but a lot more aches and pains, unfortunately.
Like, you got to be kidding me with this.
Yeah, these designer sneakers look great, but they feel like shit after an hour
Yeah,
or two.
these are fantastic. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm going to have to start taking a page out of your book. Yeah. Although, I don't know, my toes don't look that good. We're going to keep these things tucked away. Only for the summer and the beach.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about ECLI-VIBES, but I got to tell you a little bit about my name because you're talking about that your wife's name is Jennifer.
Yeah.
And you were saying how it's such a common name. I want to tell you the story about why I was named Jennifer.
Please.
Because I think it ties into, and it literally just came to me as you were saying it. I think it ties into the reason why I do this work and why I'm so passionate about the work. I feel like I have something to prove. Maybe I even have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I don't know. Or I have to sort of, I know when to kind of assert that, right? And I've been able to bring it into maybe a more grateful or gracious way to bring that to the table, not, in an angry and I've got something to prove to everybody sort of way, right? So take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, so I was named Jennifer because my dad is from Argentina. My mother's from Ecuador. And they met in Queens at a party. They were in their early 30s. I think my mom was like 30. My dad was 31, something like that. So they met and they were married four or 5 months later.
Wow. And
then they had me a year later. And my father had just came from Argentina, hardly spoke English. He was leaving some serious political turmoil in Argentina, and he really needed a place to go for a little bit to lay low.
Okay.
And
we need to get him on the show. Get that backstory.
Oh, he's got some stories. I take a lot of inspiration from my mom, my dad, and where they've come from and what they've done. And I feel like because of that, I have to make them proud. I have to they always say, do better than we did. And they've done amazing.
Generational progress.
Exactly. So he's here from Argentina. My mom has been here from Ecuador since she was like 13. So she's been here a little longer than he was. They have me and they say, we want the most American name, the most common name, because her middle name is going to be Guadalupe and her last name is going to be Garcia. So let's name her the most American name. And my father went to the nursery where, they have all the different names, and he was looking at the names and he saw like 7 Jennifers. That is literally how I got my name.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, so it really
I said it's such a common name.
It's so common. I was like, that's literally what I was named.
Dad. Good job. That's how you assimilate.
Exactly why I was named Jennifer.
That's it's part of the immigrant story, which is especially with Latinos, it's about assimilating, right? So, we're from the Dominican Republic. Well, my grandparents and my mother, and they were all taught to come here and marry up. Which was to marry the whitest or the lightest skinned Puerto Rican that you can, so that you can assimilate and you can fit in and you can make this American dream come true. Obviously, that's not the only way to do it, but I mean, when you get off the plane, that's what works.
It's very similar to what I grew up hearing, not necessarily from my parents, but from our family. It was maybe even implied in a way.
Yeah.
So I definitely resonate with that, and I think it's definitely built the character that I have. I never felt lesser than or below, or, I never felt that way. I never felt like I was betrayed in some way because, I didn't have the same, maybe the same starting point as other people. But as I've gotten older, I realized that maybe I did.
Right.
I just never looked at it that way. And I think it's so important how reframing the way you look at your situation could either dig you deeper or pull you out.
Perspective is everything.
Absolutely it is. So I think my parents were vital to giving me the perspective of, I don't care where you came from. I don't care how much we have or don't have. You are responsible for your life. And you're responsible for doing something great and bringing something great into this world. And they've always laid that foundation. And I have been very lucky to have been surrounded by parents and siblings, my sister, who we love on and we take care of each other. And we've always been that way. And part of the reason why I do the work that I do, and I will never forget this, we had a strategic strategic planning meeting when we first started ECLI. Because before it was ECLI-VIBES, it was solely ECLI. And we sat with the strategic planner and she went, go, tell me, why do you do this? And I started, she's like, no, don't think, tell me, say it, throw it out there. And I went, love. And I sunk down and I'm like, oh, that was the corniest thing I could have ever said. I could have come up with so many other reasons, social justice, equality, all healing. I could have said all of these amazing things that, they have to do with the work that I do, but love came out. And I remember just sinking into my chair and waiting for what everybody else was saying. And they all had these great things to say. And I was like, ugh. Over the years, I cannot tell you that has changed. It has always been love. And then I realized that there's this overpouring of love that I've been lucky enough to have from my family and what I grew up in, or even the perspective that I had. I always felt love. Even if you hated me, I swear, I thought you loved me. Right. So I think that was, it's a sort of a superpower that you have.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a mistake. I mean, it's what sets us apart from all the other animals. I mean, there are other animals like elephants and that feel deeply, but love is the one human characteristic that we have above all others. I mean, obviously our brains and the ability to hunt and survive and all that good stuff and outsmart a predator that can physically outdo us. But love and, compassion are the greatest motivators for our existence and for helping others, which, in my humble opinion, is what gives life purpose.
Absolutely.
So you were fortunate enough to experience love, and you have founded an organization that deals with people that, if I had to guess, were missing or had that component very misconstrued as far as what love was to them or how they sought it out. Because a victim may feel that being abused, and that is part of being loved, because that dysfunction and distortion of the messages they received as children or saw along the way are impacting their ability to have the perspective that you so beautifully kind of articulated. So with that said, how do you lead with love in your organization, and how do you recruit your staff members? Is that something that, becomes a point of conversation? Because you sunk into your chair thinking it was a silly answer, but there's no greater, the Beatles said it, right? All we need is love.
Now I'm singing it from the rooftops. Right. I think I just had to kind of get rid of that feeling that I had something, I had to say something great. My words had to be so strong, and I had to articulate to the T, and I had to say something so smart and brainy. No. I needed to get rid of all of that. That was ego. That was all ego that was sitting on my shoulder. That was the ego talking. It was the ego that actually messed me up. I had to get down to the core of it. And at the core of it was love. And it always has been. And it continues to be. So to answer your question about leading with love, I think there's a couple of pieces that go into leading with love. Number one is you have to love yourself. And that is not a simple journey. No. I don't think that happens overnight. And I think it's what most people struggle with. Yeah. Because once you learn to love yourself, you can set boundaries for yourself. And you'll see that people react to those boundaries. They respond. They can react, but they can also respond to those boundaries. And if the boundaries that you have set for yourself are, I only love myself. I will not accept anything less than something that is serving me and allowing me to know that I love myself. And I think that our clients struggle with that a lot too, where our clients their understanding of love is skewed, right? Because of maybe of the way that they've grown up, the things that they've experienced, the way that they perceived love, because maybe they didn't have any. So they took what they could. We're human. We need connection. We need love. We need affection. Yeah. So as children, we do what we can to grab on to whatever might be close enough to love. Right. So I think leading with love, the first step is loving yourself. And that's a journey. And I can tell you that probably, it might have taken me a little quicker than I've seen other people, because it is a requirement in the work that we do. You have to be pouring from a cup that is overflowing to do the work that we do. And that doesn't mean that it's perfect. And that doesn't mean that your cup's overflowing every single day. And it doesn't mean that 100% has to be, your 100% might be 5% to me that day, or vice versa. But we've got each other's back because we're a team. So the day that you can't find the love for yourself, I got you. But the day that, I need it, you're going to be there for me. So that's how we lead with love.
And you scaled this organization from humble beginnings of, I read that you worked out of trunks to now how many employees?
So we have a little over 40 and we're expanding, and we have multiple grants in right now. Some government contracts and things like that in the works that might double us. So literally double. So that's not signed, sealed, and delivered, but we are right now, currently, we are building out our systems to make sure that they're scalable, because unfortunately the need is very great. Right. In Nassau County, we saw a huge organization close their doors. They're the only, domestic violence specific organization in Nassau County. So now our calls have increased exponentially in Suffolk County. Our domestic violence partners who have like the shelters. So we have other organizations we work with very closely that have shelters. We don't have a shelter at our organization. They're working to get our clients in, but then they're taking 3 calls from Nassau County, and we're only a Suffolk County, organization. So we're struggling to meet the need that exists right now. So scaling has to be part of what we're doing right now.
Now, what are some of the cases that you see coming your way, and how do clients find their way into ECLI? Is it through, Google searches, which we know is probably rare? I did hear somewhere, and obviously statistics change depending where you read them, but a domestic abuse victim can take as many as 7 times before they actually make the leap of faith to say, you know what, I've had enough. My children deserve better. I deserve better. Or find either so much pain that they need to escape, or they finally found enough love for themselves that they need to escape.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and escaping is the most dangerous time. So when they've made that decision to escape, to leave, it's one of the most dangerous times that person will experience, is when fatality is at its highest level. So that's our job. And I will say very plainly, our job is to make sure that the people who need us don't die.
Wow.
So it is the easiest way to put it. That is our job. Because yes, it takes time for healing. It takes time to do all of these things, to love yourself. But you can't do that if you can't survive it. So
Absolutely.
That is our number one priority. So when people call us, we do analytics on Google. We do get a lot of Google searches, and a lot of Google searches are literally from domestic violence. People will just Google domestic violence, and I can see how many numbers of people got to our page or called our phone number. Google's an amazing resource, by the way. We use Google for everything because it's so integrated into like everyday life for the average person, where we use it in so many different ways. But anyway, it will tell us that somebody Googled domestic violence and then called us. Like, we can see the analytics
and
on
Google
our page.
Will provide this, like, I know if I'm selling plumbing or t-shirts, I have to put in a zip code, I have to pay to advertise. How does that work for a nonprofit like yours in conjunction with search engines like Google?
We haven't paid for anything extra for them. That is just as
it's like a community service.
Yeah, it's like a community service. We do have Google Suite for our entire organization. It's what we use, to just navigate the day-to-day. But that's not even connected to, the Google search.
That's just the back-end administrative stuff.
Exactly.
So I guess Google unknowingly provides these community resources because they know the importance of that outlet. If somebody's doing this, they're obviously suffering, struggling, they're at risk. What exactly does ECLI do? And I gave you a bit of an intro, but I want to know,
Sure.
From A to Z, what kind of services you provide, who your clients are, and what you can do for them. Let's call them clients, but I think they're victims.
Yeah.
More than anything else. But, we do have to keep it, I guess, on a professional level. So, for the organization.
I'll say survivors. So we usually say survivors.
So how do you service survivors?
Sure.
With ECLI?
So we take a very holistic approach. And if I go down the list of services that we have, we would be here till next week. So the only reason why I like to really explain it this way is I need you to really get the feeling, the picture of what one of our staff members is providing to one survivor who's calling us in need.
Right.
So imagine that you had a cousin who was in a relationship and was wanting to get out and called you and said, I really want to leave and I've got a plan, but my car just broke down. And part of my plan was to drive my car and my kids and get out of state. I found a safe place. I've connected with whatever, right? What would you do? Right? What would you do as that person? You go, okay, let me figure out what resources I have. And if I don't have these resources, what other resources do I have that I can connect my cousin with to make sure that she can get her car fixed, because she needs the car to get out, because she's already set up 3 different things, but there's 4 holes missing. There's 4 pieces that she needs help with. And that's the thing. People are smart. People are resilient, and survivors will call us and they know what they need. So we always are very, very clear that they are calling us and they are telling us what is it that they need. And we're just sort of plugging in the other items that they might have. And hey, trust me, sometimes people are calling in complete crisis mode. And our job right there is just to de-escalate. Right. De-escalate so they're not seeing red anymore, and they can actually come up with some kind of plan or procedure of what the next step is going to be. And that might take even a couple calls sometimes. Right. So our services are A to Z. It could be just connecting them with a church to get the funding to pay for the car that's going to get fixed. It maybe costs $500, but she doesn't have it.
Of course.
Maybe it means that she needs an order of protection because she's in immediate danger. We need to get her into a shelter, and we need her to get an order of protection. Maybe that's what we have to do. Maybe there's no food on the table. She's left. She's been in her new apartment. She's got things going. She's got a job lined up, but right now times are really tough and she has no food. We're going to connect her with food. So I like to explain it. What we do is what any person whose friend, mother, sister, cousin is in need of help would do for that person. You'd set them up as best you could. Right. You have to have boundaries too, right? Because you can't drag them to go and get the services. You can't force them to do something that they don't want to do or they're not ready to. You do your best to supply them with those, with those resources. And then you say, I'm here for you when and if you need me. So it's A to Z. So to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of our services, without going through a whole list.
Right, sure.
I really like to say it's crisis intervention, it's advocacy, and it's counseling. So those are the 3 main services that we have. Within those 3 main services is the A to Z list that I explained to you. So if somebody calls and they're in immediate danger, there's something we need to assess lethality. We need to remove them from their location. We need to relocate them. We need to get order protections. That is a crisis intervention call. That is our service for that moment. If we have somebody who they've moved to a new school district, because they had to leave, there was an abuser and, they've left that dangerous situation. Now they're in a new school district with their child, but they're having trouble. The kid is acting out. We might provide some advocacy services in the school. So there's an advocacy piece that we're doing there, or we're advocating for them to get, resources like food stamps or something just to kind of get them going, get them on their feet again, right? So that's our advocacy work. And then our counseling is everybody wants counseling, but then when you see the work that goes behind it, you don't want counseling anymore. So it's very important to understand that you only get out of counseling how much you're going to give. And unfortunately, because we are funded through grants, which means we are stewards of this funding. You're paying for this funding. Our neighbors are paying for this funding. I'm responsible to make sure that the funding is going to the highest need and it's being used in the most resourceful way. So we have to make sure that clients are not just coming in for counseling to say they're showing up and they're sitting here and we're just, we're not moving towards any goals. We're just kind of sitting around and having this, this conversation, and there's no clear goals. There's no plan. And I mean, this is what the space that I walked into a few years ago is we had people who were receiving counseling from us for, 3-4 years. We have such a long list of, and I should explain that because we took over an organization that was longstanding. That's where VIBES came in. So we started off as ECLI, and then we acquired another nonprofit that's called VIBES, Victims Information Bureau of Suffolk County. Together now we're ECLI-VIBES. So a lot of what we had to do initially was change that culture. We only have a limited amount of funding. We have to make sure that the people who need it and are putting in some work are going to get something out of this. So
you also offer the counseling services in-house, or do you refer out to other counseling services or domestic abuse counseling services?
I can tell you last quarter, we served 637, I might be off by a couple, 637 individuals with counseling services in-house. In-house. That's not including the referrals out. So there are a ton of people who are in need of counseling services. But we're also realizing that the understanding of what counseling is also needing to be clarified.
Yeah.
Because people are, oh, no, just go get counseling. Go get counseling. Go get counseling.
It's a loaded word.
It is a loaded word.
It's like going to the gym and expecting an instant result. Counseling is something where you've got to do the work. You've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to have some level of emotional availability and intelligence and vulnerability in order to work through some of the things that are keeping you stuck. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I think people know the word counseling and they know they can benefit from it, but they don't know how to actively participate in it for their own betterment. So you may have somebody going to counseling for 3 or 4 years and they're making very minimal progress, or they're still caught in a cycle because, and here we'll move toward child abuses. We've all been running a program, most of us unbeknownst to us, that was downloaded onto us from the ages of 0 to 7 by our parents and our caretakers or our grandparents, whether it be good, bad, or otherwise. And we're caught in that cycle. And we don't know it. So we may make baby strides or baby steps, or we may make monumental strides only to find ourselves right back to where we started, disheartened, giving up. This shit doesn't work. And we just give up before the magic happens.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that counseling can provide? And what kind of counseling do you provide? Is it to families? Is it to victims who've already escaped? Are there any situations where they're still living with the abuser? And how difficult is that?
Yeah. So before I answer those questions, if I could just flip it really quickly on what we were just talking about in terms of counseling and the understanding of the word counseling and what it means. The flip side of it, what we were seeing when we first took over the Victims Information Bureau, is that people were going to counseling, but there was no food on the table. They weren't sure where they were going to live. Yeah. They weren't sure how they were going to pay rent that month. How are you going to sit with a person for 1 hour and talk about all these different things and not be able to give them some sort of resource or support to get to that next step? Or you're going to expect any kind of healing in a counseling session when immediate needs to survive are not being met. Right. So what we had to do immediately when we first came into the organization, taking over, the Victims Information Bureau, because mind you, we went from, maybe 13 staff members with ECLI to like over 50 when we took over VIBES. So overnight, every single system that we built broke. Our payrolls.
It wasn't designed for that.
It was not designed for that. Everything broke. There was such a huge learning curve for me as a leader, understanding how to lead a much larger group of people with middle management. With it was a huge. It was a big undertaking, and that is where I learned a lot. About myself, because it was time to really figure it out. What areas was I doubling down in? Anyway, so what we did right away is we opened up a food pantry in our building. So if clients were coming in for counseling, they were also getting fed, because we can't expect you to sit here and have a conversation about healing and your stomach's growling and you're hungry and you're not sure how your kids are going to eat. Yeah. So that was number one priority. Number two, we had to figure out housing situation. So people were scared about where they were going to live, how they're going to pay rent. So we worked really hard to get some government grants. We've got federal grants. We have like different townships. Right. So it's not county grants, they're township grants that we have that support housing. So we can pay first month's rent, last month's rent. We can provide rent maybe sometimes up to 3-6 months. For people.
While somebody gets on their feet.
Exactly. Now, if you're addressing those immediate needs and you're coupling it with counseling, now we're getting somewhere.
Right.
So
basic
it goes
necessities have to be addressed.
It goes both.
Before we can dive deep into what's holding you back or what ailments you're suffering from unknowingly.
Exactly. And then we can also create those boundaries as, hey, we're at a point now that now you've got to do your homework. Right. And now you've got to do that deep work that it's going to be tough, because now you're fed. You've got housing, right. You've got things, organized. Now let's go deep, right. And let's get that healing done. So
I would imagine there's some resistance to that from some people, where that trauma is so deep and so gut-wrenching and painful for them that they may, just be resistant to it or the idea of it. Are you using traditional counseling? I know now there's so many holistic approaches to counseling and meditation and hypnosis. And, if we're doing it in the private sector, probably not in the public sector, there's plant medicine and all these other things. I only mention that to say that there's a world of knowledge that was unavailable just a decade ago that is now available. What are they embracing in the public sector and injecting into programs like yours?
I'd like to inject everything that you just said into the public sector. That is part of my mission is everything that we do that folks who have every resource at their, at their feet. I want to be able to somehow bring that to the folks who might not necessarily be able to benefit from it. So the idea is that, we want more private funding. We want more grant funding because people are smart. People are resilient. And you can teach a community how to heal themselves. You don't need to do all of that work and invest all these hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars all the time. You can teach communities how to heal themselves by motivating a small group. It's a small group of people. So that's what we're still figuring that out. I have by no way, shape or form have I figured that out or our teams, but we are definitely, that is the goal. So, we're testing things out, which would be, I'm out there now talking to business owners. I'm out there talking to anybody who will hear me out and wants to connect and maybe is interested in doing something good. And what I believe will happen, and I've already seen it happen in smaller ways, is that people are starting to go, oh, okay, maybe I could donate my expertise in hypnosis and come and do this. Right. And I'm very big on, train the trainer. Right. So train us how to do it. Teach us what you do, and we can teach it to the people who might not be able to afford your services. And listen, I don't want to put anyone out of business either because, but I think we all know there's plenty for everyone to eat. Right. If we can understand that. I mean, Yeah,
and I mean, like you mentioned, the people with unlimited resources can, biohacking is the new term in terms of physical health, not necessarily mental. But yeah, obviously people with unlimited resources at their disposal can afford to go and pay, however many $100 an hour for something that may give them a couple of days at the back end of their life if they're lucky. That is not available to these people. They're just surviving. Their basic needs are just being met. And, that self-awareness maybe hasn't even been reached. So it may be wishful thinking at that extreme level that I just mentioned, but it is very available when you reach out to community that cares, because I would imagine everybody knows somebody who is a survivor of one of the kinds of abuse that you work toward, supporting. In terms of the child abuse, a lot of domestic abuse is both to the spouse, usually a woman, and the children. Do you get cases from the system once things have hit the fan? The abusers may be locked away. How do people find you if they're not finding you on their own? What community organizations are you working with to, kind of fill the need, for your service?
So it's one of the reasons why we started ECLI. So back in 2015, we started working with Judge Camacho. He runs the youth court here in Suffolk County. And what was happening is, Judge was calling us and saying, hey, I've got these, this kid, so smart and amazing, but really, it's got some issues with the family. If you read their psychosocial, you just want to cry of what this kid's experienced. Who can you connect? Who can you get to help this kid out? And that's really how ECLI was born. So we started with youth, and specifically youth boys. So I don't talk about that very often because it doesn't come up. So I'm really glad that you mentioned it. But we started this in 2015, really focusing on youth boys who were incarcerated.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was mainly because of Judge Camacho. And he just refused to lose anybody else to the streets, anybody else to overdoses, anybody else to gang violence. And he was really just a huge supporter of what we do. And I'm really proud to say that he calls us his angels.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, we just love him beyond measure.
Shout out to Judge Camacho.
He is one of a kind. He is a change maker in so many ways. So he would really, we worked with him to this day. So we're in the youth court and we will get clients assigned to us. He will say, I've got this kid. Here you go. Work with the child, work with the parents if the parents are involved, and we'll do our best to organize whatever this child may be dealing with. Immediately, it is engaging with the families because if the family is even, engageable, because a lot of the times they're not. We've started our youth mentorship program where we're connecting youth mentors to the youth that are coming out from Judge Camacho's part. So these are youth who are involved in the criminal justice system. And we're sort of peeling away all the layers of the trauma that they've experienced. They have watched people kill themselves. They have watched people be murdered in front of them. They have been sexually abused. They have been, I mean, when I tell you through the ringer, of course this kid's fucking mad. Right. Of course this kid is telling you to kick rocks. Right. Of course this kid wants nothing to do with you because every single adult in their life has let them down.
Or betrayed them or hurt them.
Yep, absolutely. I get teary-eyed because I have 2 boys.
Yeah.
And we started working with Judge Camacho. And when I had those boys, I was like, man, I love them so much. Every single child should feel that amount of love. Right. And it's just not the case. No.
I always say my one saving grace was my mother's love. And as an adult, I realized just how fortunate I was to receive that because I lead with love and even my logo is in the shape of a heart. Love is truly the thing that lets people know that they're worthy from an early stage, right? Because if your parents loved you, no matter what, or even if one parent loved you, if someone, your aunt, your uncle, it doesn't matter if anyone loved you, you can go to that person when all other things fail, right? You know that there's hope, there's a hug, there's some warmth, there's that connection that human beings so desperately need. Unfortunately, I don't want to say manufactured, but coming from an outside source, it's harder to receive. And coming from an outside source that is receiving you after all the damage that's been done by the people that you trusted the most have betrayed that, I would imagine it's an uphill battle. Mm-hmm. So commend the organization for what you do. Where do you see the organization going and growing? Because you talked about doubling in size. Are you moving into Nassau County? Are you looking to expand the services that you offer, or are you just looking to scale the services that you offer to impact and help more people?
Yeah, currently it's to scale the services that we offer right now. So I know that the different levels of services that we provide will grow at some point. But right now we need to sort of focus on the task at hand, which is people are calling in crisis. They're in danger. They need shelter. They need some sort of intervention when it comes down to order of protections. Some folks are calling, they need, a sexual assault forensic exam because their child has been assaulted by a boyfriend. These things are what we're getting calls on every day. So those are the kind of core things I'm concerned about right now. I'm not 100% sure about Nassau County yet. I know that the need exists. Right. Are we willing to go into Nassau County? Absolutely. It's not signed, sealed, and delivered, but we're definitely making phone calls. We're definitely starting connections. We're seeing, where we're needed, where we're wanted. The last thing on earth that we want to do is duplicate services. That is one thing that is just such a waste of time, such a waste of money. We need to be working collaboratively, and we've learned that in Suffolk County. I think we have a really great group of domestic violence providers, sexual assault forensic examiners, different programming that we work collaboratively. It's not to replicate what another agency is already doing. And I don't know Nassau County like I know Suffolk County, but we have amazing partners in Nassau County that we've been working with for years.
Right.
So let them
do what they do.
Let them do what they do and let us know where you need us. So that's sort of where it stands with Nassau County right now and expanding.
Now, on the funding side, on the administrative side, what are some of the challenges that a nonprofit such as yourself faces? And then obviously, if you turn on the news, it's all over, funding's being cut here, or funding's being cut there. And are you experiencing any of that? If you are, what's your plan for, I guess, making up for those lost dollars or those lost resources?
Sure. Right now, we're currently not being impacted by any of the funding cuts. It has not affected us. It has been a threat to affect us, but as of today, there has been no impact. What we're doing is we're not coming from a place of lack, and we're not coming from a place of fear. I think that's very, very important in leadership, is you cannot be afraid that the other shoe is going to drop. You cannot be afraid to take some risks, strategies, educated, thoughtful, strategic risks.
Right.
I think it's risky to not take those risks.
Right.
So we have to be, sort of on the forefront of how are we going to make up for these dollars if they do leave? How are we going to, navigate this? So we've got some things in the works. We've been rolling out our Medicaid program, and then Medicaid came on the news where, now they're thinking about cutting some Medicaid dollars and things like that. So again, nothing has affected us yet. I don't think it will either, because if anybody was to come and look and audit and see and we get audited all the time. We're a 501c3. We are constantly under audit. When I tell you, it is like you can see exactly where every single dollar goes. And not only just that, you can see that we are actually injecting the community. This last year, it's over $600,000 cash dollars that we were able to bring back into the community. That is through helping somebody fix their car. That is through giving somebody first month's rent, last month's rent. That is for paying for somebody to get their license or their birth certificate. These are small things that add up over time that help people from spiraling. There's simple things we can do.
I'm glad you touched on that, because most people don't know how this works. They just think, well, the government pays for it and that's it. And, can someone who's a taxpayer see where your money's going? Absolutely. Is that level of transparency available?
We're a 501c3, so everything that we do has to be transparent. Right. You can go through our tax return. So if you look at our tax returns, it's clear as day where everything went in. And I'm so proud to say that our in-kind donations that we get from people, you can also track. You can see where every single diaper went. You can see where every single can of formula or bag of apples that got donated. You can see where this goes. And I think that's so vital to be transparent. And I know why not, some organizations might not be transparent, because it's very easy to go the other way.
Right.
But if your heart's in the right place, you can sleep at night. And you're doing the right thing. I always say there is this balance of doing the right thing and having sort of flexibility in going, can I argue that? If I were put in front of a judge and jury today, can I argue why I made that decision? Well, one, it has to be legal, right? But two, can I argue the reason why I maybe did it a little bit, a little bit differently?
Right.
And if that's the case, then I can sleep at night. My team can sleep at night. And we all know that the numbers don't lie. You can follow everything. And
follow the money.
You have to be able to do that, especially in the nonprofit world, because you want people to trust you and to see, like, it's not going, into my pocket. It's not going into, administrative overhead or whatever that is.
Right. And that, I always use Charity Navigator as my resource if I'm going to donate to anything. But now, as we discuss, what I do instead of clicking a button, I've been very fortunate, and I use my resources to put together this show to give you a platform, because, these episodes cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars to produce, both having you here in a professional studio and then editing and then promoting the video on YouTube or whatever, what have you. There's cost involved. So I could donate to your organization, or I could hopefully tenfold that donation by giving you a platform and spreading your message. I think people are cynical by nature and don't really understand the inner workings of it. So I appreciate the fact that you brought up the business component of it, because most people would just love to shoot it down. oh, you're taking government money and we don't know where it's going. It's like, no, you actually have the ability to see where it's going. Now, some of your favorite charities may not give you that same transparency, and they have the biggest advertising budget and the biggest administrative budget, and more than half of the money you give is going to costs that are never going to benefit the end user or the client, as you call them, or the survivors in your case. So I appreciate the transparency and the honesty. Not all organizations are built equally. Yours seems to be somewhat, having built from a grassroots perspective, you've kept that intact, that integrity intact. So I appreciate that. Now, you mentioned in-kind donations. How much of your budget comes from in-kind versus, local or government funding? Is there any federal funding? Where do you guys get the money to fund such an amazing program?
Yeah, so we have federal funding, we have state funding, and we have county funding. And then we have other smaller sources of funding from our townships. We also get from local elected officials that might, support our causes and discretionary funds, small amounts, but they all add up and they're very impactful and they're very helpful. So that's some of our government funding. I can tell you that we are working to move away from government funding, not move away, not use it at all, but we have to think more like a for-profit business in terms of bringing the money back, back onto the table, where it can't just come from one, or three government sources of funding. We have to diversify in order to stay strong, in order to stay nimble, because also we don't want elected officials, sort of dangling the carrot.
Holding it over your head.
We cannot do that.
Politicians, those great people, listen, they don't, I always say, coming from the private sector, government is necessary, but I think it also gets convoluted and corrupted, because if you don't create that wealth, you are much more reckless with those dollars, because you have control over it. So it's like, oh, well, why would somebody take a job that pays them, at a local level, less than six figures, but they have all this influence? It's because they're handing out millions of dollars in contracts. So corruption is inevitable, because when they give those contracts, they're giving them selfishly sometimes to people that will have interests of their own in mind. So again, it's I'm not shitting on anybody. It's just the reality of the world. And that's why I love that you brought it up, which is the private sector. What are some of the things that ECLI and yourself are doing to attract more private funding? Is that from individual donors like myself or someone in the community? Is that local businesses, or are those large-scale corporations that you're going after? So we haven't nailed it down completely, but I can tell you sort of what the idea is. And I always say, dream big and measure small, measure progress small, because it takes a while. These little wins add up. And right now we're in this area of little wins where we're connecting with so many different businesses, because what we see that survivors need is, again, they are smart, they're resilient, they've got all these different ideas. They want to start businesses. They want to, we had one who wanted to do a dog grooming company, and she had this whole idea and this whole business plan, and it's fantastic, but she needed some seed funding. How do we do those kinds of things where there's a way to help our survivors not only survive, but thrive? Right. So right now we're in the mode of, we're dealing with survival, but I know that the next phase of ECLI-VIBES is going to be thriving. Right.
And that's where I think all of these small wins that we're getting they're just going to keep compounding, and they will eventually be exactly what we know they're going to be. And I see it as being able to support our survivors in starting their own businesses, and then pouring that back into the work that we're doing, because it might be where they started. Right. So that's sort of, in short, the ideas that we have.
Right. Well, you're paying it forward, and those small wins start to add up, as you said, and no stone should be unturned when it comes to attracting dollars that are going to help better someone's life. And there's no more valuable thing that we can do as human beings than help other human beings. And I think so many of us, not to get off topic, but the mental health crisis that we're suffering is that so many of us have become so self-centered. And, obviously you add technology to that, that we're just not moving our lives forward. And when you're stagnant, you turn that inward, and that inward anger and frustration becomes depression. So I don't think there's actually a mental health crisis. I think there's a crisis of people inaction. And it's coming out in the form of, this catchphrase of mental health. Now, what you're dealing with, those are real issues. Someone is facing life or death. Someone is being physically abused, sexually abused, emotionally abused on a regular basis. That person probably has real mental health issues, but then there's an entire generation of young adults that is suffering this mental health belief of, and again, this is my opinion, belief of this mental health crisis because they haven't found something to live for. Purpose. They're truly just surviving. So I just want to thank you for what you do. Thank you for stepping into your purpose of love and leading with it and leadership. I can tell you're an amazing leader. Never claimed to be a perfect leader. And thankfully, at least not at this point in your life, it doesn't seem a reluctant leader. So for so long, I've been a reluctant leader. I've recently been called to lead, and here I am, the reluctant leader, but those always make for the best ones in the end. Or so I hear. We'll see. The journey's still unfolding, as is yours. Please tell our audience where they can find more information about you, ECLI-VIBES, and most importantly, how they can help if this episode has, impacted them in any way.
Sure. So you can locate our services on our website. It's ECLI-VIBES.org. If you need immediate assistance, you can call our Hope Line. We have a 24/7 Hope Line. All the information is on the website. I love to say advocate, donate, or volunteer your time because your expertise is very important to us as well. You can always advocate for our services too. Advocate for our work to be on a platform like yours, Sean. Thank you so much for this. It's been amazing.
Pleasure.
And you can donate straight on our website. You can go to our donation page and you can donate to support our cause.
Jennifer, thank you so much for coming out today. I appreciate you sharing your time and sharing your story. If this episode has affected you, impacted you, or struck a chord in any way, make sure to find Jennifer and ECLI-VIBES in the bio. Click that link, make a donation, or even more importantly, if you have an expertise that can help someone in need who's suffering from some sort of abuse, that is more valuable than your dollars, believe it or not. And you can pass that skill on to the organization and the person in need and pay it forward. Thank you as always for tuning in to the Real Mentors podcast. I'm your host, Sean Martin. And as always, let's get it.